Few westerns have been as misunderstood as The Wild Bunch. Once released, it shocked audiences with its brutal depiction of violence and left critics divided for years. But what most people still get wrong is that the bloodshed was never the point. Behind the scenes, director Sam Peckinpah fought battles of his own, pushing his cast to exhaustion, clashing with crew members, and filming in conditions that blurred the line between chaos and creativity. The result was a movie that looked and felt unlike anything before it. What few realize is that the version most people saw was not the one Peckinpah intended. Key footage was quietly removed after release, and the reasons had nothing to do with violence. Number 1. The cut version, lost backstory. When the film hit theaters, it ran into trouble almost immediately. But the issue was not the graphic content that had critics outraged. The real problem was the runtime. After disappointing box office returns in its opening weeks, Warner Brothers made the decision to trim the movie, hoping a shorter cut would attract larger audiences and recoup their investment. What ended up on the cutting room floor surprised many who assumed the studio targeted the violence. Instead, the removed footage consisted of character flashbacks, scenes that revealed the pasts of Pike Bishop and the other outlaws. These moments provided crucial context for their motivations and relationships. Without them, the men seemed more hollow, their choices harder to understand. The violence remained completely intact. Every shootout, every blood squib, every slow-motion death stayed exactly where Peckinpah placed it. What vanished was the emotional architecture beneath the action. For decades, viewers experienced a version of the film that felt colder and more detached than intended, never realizing what had been quietly stripped away from the story. Number 2. Children were used to disturb you. From the very first scene, something feels deeply wrong. A group of children surrounds a scorpion, watching as ants slowly overwhelm it. They laugh. They observe without flinching, and this is not an accident. Peckinpah placed children in violent moments throughout the movie, for one specific reason: to make the audience deeply uncomfortable. Traditional westerns kept kids far from the gunfire. They represented innocence, a future worth protecting. But in this film, children witness brutality up close. They do not run away. They do not cry. They watch, absorb, and in some cases imitate what they see. The effect is unsettling in a way that pure violence alone cannot achieve. Peckinpah wanted viewers to feel disturbed, not thrilled. By removing the safe distance between youth and bloodshed, he shattered any possibility of heroic fantasy. There are no clean victories here, no righteous gunfights, just a world where violence has seeped into everything, corrupting even the youngest eyes. The discomfort was designed, and it still works today. Number 3. Fake blood changed action movies. Before 1969, westerns handled gunfights with restraint. A man got shot, he clutched his chest, he fell. Clean, simple, bloodless. But Peckinpah had no interest in maintaining that tradition. He wanted audiences to see what bullets actually do to human bodies, and he used innovative technology to make it happen. The production employed an unprecedented number of blood squibs, small explosive devices hidden beneath costumes that simulated wounds on impact. When a character took a bullet, the result was visceral, immediate, and deeply uncomfortable. Blood sprayed across the frame, bodies twisted. The sanitized deaths of earlier westerns suddenly looked like pure fantasy. This approach overwhelmed traditional editing techniques. There was simply too much happening in each frame to cut around cleanly. Editors had to embrace the chaos, layering angles and slowing footage to capture every impact. The result permanently changed how action sequences were filmed. What began as a creative experiment became an industry standard, influencing decades of filmmakers who followed. Number 4. Chaos on set, studio backed him. The production was difficult from the start. Peckinpah ran over schedule, burned through the budget, and clashed with nearly everyone around him. Crew members grew exhausted from the demanding pace. Tensions flared daily. Rumors spread that the director had lost control entirely. Yet somehow, Warner Brothers never pulled the plug. The reason was simple: the footage looked extraordinary. Despite the disorder on set, the dailies revealed something undeniably powerful. Studio executives watched scenes that felt unlike anything in the Western genre, raw and unflinching in ways that justified the turmoil behind the camera. They made the calculated decision to keep funding the production, betting that the final product would be worth the chaos. This support came with limits. The studio remained nervous about escalating costs and missed timelines, but they never replaced Peckinpah or shut down filming entirely. In an era when directors often battled executives for creative freedom, this project survived because the work itself made the argument. The disorder was real, but so was the artistry emerging from it. Number 5. The finale was shot like warfare. The climactic shootout remains one of the most overwhelming sequences ever filmed. Bodies fall in every direction, bullets tear through walls and flesh alike. The camera barely keeps up with the destruction unfolding everywhere, and none of this happened by accident. Peckinpah designed the finale to feel less like a movie scene and more like an actual battle. Multiple cameras captured the action simultaneously, each positioned at different angles and distances from the carnage. Rather than choreographing every movement precisely, Peckinpah encouraged a controlled chaos. Actors moved through the space, reacting to explosions and gunfire in real time, creating an unpredictable energy that careful staging could never replicate. The editing amplified this effect dramatically. Shots lasted fractions of a second. Angles collided without warning. Slow motion stretched moments of agony, while rapid cuts accelerated the surrounding mayhem. Viewers were not meant to follow the action clearly. They were meant to feel overwhelmed, trapped inside a sequence where survival seemed impossible and escape meant nothing at all. Number 6. Mexico let them break the rules. Filming in Hollywood would have meant endless restrictions. Union rules, safety regulations, and studio oversight would have limited what Peckinpah could accomplish. So the production moved to Mexico, where the rules were different and the freedom was nearly absolute. This crucial decision shaped everything about the final product audiences would see. In Mexico, the crew could stage stunts that American studios would never approve. Explosions happened closer to actors. Falls were more dangerous. The line between controlled filmmaking and genuine risk blurred constantly. Local authorities offered little interference, allowing Peckinpah to push boundaries that would have triggered immediate shutdowns back in California or anywhere else in America. This freedom came at a cost. Injuries occurred more frequently than on typical productions. The heat was punishing, and medical support was limited in remote locations. But the footage captured during those grueling weeks had an authenticity that safer methods could never achieve. The danger was real, and it showed on screen. Every frame carried the weight of a production willing to risk everything for realism. Number 7. Drinking shaped the set's mood. Alcohol was never far from the production. Peckinpah drank heavily throughout filming, and he was not alone in this habit. Cast and crew members joined him regularly, blurring the boundaries between work and excess. The atmosphere on set became volatile, unpredictable, and strangely productive all at once. The director's moods shifted dramatically depending on how much he had consumed. Some days brought bursts of creative energy that pushed everyone to deliver their best work. Other days brought explosive confrontations that left crew members shaken and deeply demoralized. Nobody knew which version of Peckinpah would show up each morning when cameras were ready to roll on location. Yet something about this chaos fed into the film itself. The tension, the exhaustion, the simmering conflicts all found their way onto the screen. Actors carried real frustration into their performances. The weariness in their faces was not entirely manufactured. What could have destroyed the production instead became part of its raw, unpolished power and striking emotional intensity. Number 8. Horses were trained to collapse. Westerns had always relied on horse stunts, but most productions used simple tricks to simulate falls. Tripwires were common, and animal safety was rarely a priority for filmmakers. Peckinpah wanted something different. He demanded falls that looked real, and achieving that meant training horses to collapse on command without mechanical intervention. Stunt coordinators spent weeks working with the animals before filming began. The horses learned to drop at specific moments, rolling in ways that appeared violent but minimized actual harm to themselves. It was a painstaking process that required patience and precision from everyone involved. When done correctly, the results were startling in their realism and impact. This approach pushed ethical boundaries that would never be acceptable today. Even with training, the risk of injury remained significant for both horses and riders throughout production. Several animals were hurt during filming, a fact that troubled some crew members at the time. The footage captured an authenticity that audiences had never seen, but the methods behind it remained controversial decades later and sparked ongoing debates about animal welfare in filmmaking. Number 9. Slow motion was moral judgment. The slow motion sequences became the film's signature, but they were never meant as stylistic flourishes or visual tricks. Peckinpah used the technique deliberately, forcing audiences to witness every consequence of violence. When bullets struck flesh, time stretched, pain lingered, There was no looking away from what these men were doing to each other. Traditional action films used editing to soften impact. Quick cuts allowed viewers to register excitement without dwelling on suffering. But here, the camera refused to move on. It held steady as bodies crumpled and blood spread across the frame. The extended duration transformed violence from spectacle into something deeply uncomfortable and morally confrontational for viewers. This was Peckinpah's intention from the start. He wanted audiences to feel the weight of every death, not cheer for it. The slow motion served as judgment, an indictment of both the characters and anyone who found pleasure in watching them suffer. Entertainment was never the goal. The technique forced reflection, demanding that viewers confront their own reactions to what they were seeing unfold before them. Number 10. The edit was built from chaos. The editing room became another battlefield. Peckinpah had shot an enormous amount of footage from multiple angles, speeds, and distances. Assembling it into a coherent film required abandoning traditional approaches entirely. Editor Lou Lombardo faced the monumental task of creating structure from intentional disorder and mountains of raw material. Rather than clean continuity, the final cut embraced fragmentation. Shots collided against each other without transition. Perspectives shifted without warning. A single moment of violence might be shown from 4 different angles in rapid succession, each lasting only a fraction of a second. The effect was disorienting by design, matching the confusion and chaos that characters experienced on screen. This editing style reflected the film's deeper themes. The world these outlaws inhabited was collapsing around them, and the fractured visuals mirrored that collapse perfectly. Nothing felt stable or safe. The audience could not settle into comfortable observation. They were pulled into the chaos, experiencing the same lack of control that defined these men's final desperate days in a dying era that no longer wanted them. Number 11. Holden defended the brutality. When the film premiered, critics attacked it relentlessly. They called it irresponsible, gratuitous, and dangerous to public morality. Many assumed the cast shared these concerns and had participated reluctantly in such a controversial project. But William Holden, the veteran actor who played Pike Bishop, refused to apologize for anything audiences saw on screen. In interviews, Holden pushed back against the outrage with surprising force. He pointed to the nightly news, where footage from Vietnam showed real bodies and real suffering in living rooms across America. Compared to those images, he argued, the film's violence was almost restrained. He questioned why fictional bloodshed sparked more controversy than actual warfare being broadcast during dinner every single evening. His comments reframed the entire debate. Holden positioned the movie not as exploitation, but as honesty. If audiences found the violence unbearable, perhaps that revealed something about their tolerance for sanitized entertainment rather than any failing of the filmmakers. His defense gave critics pause and helped shift the conversation toward the film's artistic intentions rather than its surface-level shock value and supposed immorality. Number 12. Aging is the real enemy. The outlaws at the center of this story are not young rebels seeking adventure. They are aging men whose bodies ache and whose reflexes have slowed considerably. The world they understood has changed around them, leaving them stranded in an era that no longer needs gunfighters or the codes they once followed. This is not a tale of adventure, but of obsolescence creeping steadily forward. Peckinpah made this theme visible in every frame. The characters move with visible effort and accumulated wear. They struggle to mount horses, they wince from old wounds that never fully healed. Their conversations return repeatedly to the past, to jobs that went wrong, and partners who died along the way. These men are not chasing glory, but desperately running from irrelevance. Violence becomes their only remaining language. It is not rebellion or resistance, but a symptom of men who have no other way to assert their existence in a changing world. Each gunfight drains them further, bringing them closer to an end they cannot escape. The real antagonist is not the army pursuing them or the warlord who betrays them. It is time itself, grinding them down with every passing scene until nothing remains. Number 13. Exhaustion became performance. The shoot was physically brutal for everyone involved. Temperatures in Mexico regularly exceeded 100 degrees during filming. Days stretched far beyond normal working hours. Cast members performed demanding stunts repeatedly, while wearing heavy period costumes. By the midpoint of production, genuine exhaustion had set in across the entire company working on the picture. Peckinpah did not try to hide this weariness from the camera. Instead, he let it seep into every performance. When actors looked drained on camera, they were not pretending. When their movements seemed labored and heavy, that fatigue was real. The punishing conditions became an unexpected tool, adding authenticity that no amount of skilled acting could fully replicate on its own. This exhaustion matched the characters perfectly. These were men at the end of their endurance, pushing through pain because stopping meant accepting defeat. The actors embodied that struggle without needing to manufacture it artificially. Their bodies told the story as much as their dialogue did. What could have been a production problem instead became one of the film's most effective elements and lasting strengths on screen. Number 14. Loyalty mattered more than logic. The plot contains gaps that careful viewers will notice upon close examination. Motivations are not always explained clearly. Decisions happen without sufficient setup. Characters make choices that seem irrational from a strategic standpoint. But Peckinpah was never interested in constructing a watertight narrative with perfect logic connecting every scene together. What mattered to him was emotional truth above all else. The bond between these men needed to feel genuine, even if the story around them had rough edges. When Pike decides to rescue Angel despite the suicidal odds, the moment works because the relationship has been established through gesture and glance rather than exposition. The loyalty is felt before it is understood intellectually by the audience. This approach frustrated some critics who expected traditional storytelling structure throughout. But Peckinpah understood that brotherhood often defies rational explanation. Men stay loyal to each other for reasons that resist easy articulation. By allowing those gaps to remain, rather than filling them with clumsy dialogue, he preserved something raw and authentic that cleaner plotting would have destroyed entirely and irreparably. Number 15. Pike Bishop was Peckinpah. The director saw himself in his protagonist more than anyone realized. Pike Bishop is a man out of step with his time, clinging to a code that the world has abandoned. He leads through stubbornness rather than inspiration. He has made enemies through arrogance and poor choices over the years. These qualities mirrored Peckinpah's own reputation in Hollywood more closely than most realized at the time. By 1969, Peckinpah had already burned bridges throughout the industry. Studios viewed him as difficult and unreliable. His drinking caused problems on every production he touched. Yet he continued making films his own way, refusing to soften his vision for commercial appeal. Like Pike, he seemed determined to go down fighting rather than quietly fade away into obscurity. This personal identification gave the film its emotional core. When Pike walks towards certain death in the finale, there is a resignation that feels deeply authentic and earned. Peckinpah understood that feeling intimately. He was not merely directing a western about outlaws. He was processing his own fears of obsolescence, his own stubbornness, his own sense that the industry he loved no longer had room for someone like him anymore. Number 16. Violence was never the reward. Many viewers walked away thinking the film glorified bloodshed. The sheer volume of gunfire and bodies suggested a celebration of destruction to casual observers. But watching carefully reveals something entirely different. No act of violence in this movie brings satisfaction or triumph. Every death leaves the survivors diminished rather than victorious. When the outlaws gun down their enemies, there is no rousing music or heroic framing to accompany their actions. The camera lingers on the cost instead. Faces register shock and exhaustion rather than exhilaration. Bodies pile up without meaning or purpose. The film refuses to provide the catharsis that audiences had come to expect from decades of traditional Western shootouts. Peckinpah designed this emptiness deliberately. He wanted viewers to feel the hollowness that violence actually produces, rather than the excitement Hollywood typically manufactured. Each confrontation drains something from the characters and from the audience alike. By the finale, the accumulated weight becomes almost unbearable. There are no winners here, only varying degrees of loss that spread across everyone the violence touches. Number 17. The gun meant the end of myths. The machine gun appears late in the story, but its presence changes everything immediately. This weapon does not belong to the Old West that the characters remember and understand. It represents industrial efficiency, the ability to end lives at a rate that renders individual skill meaningless. When Pike finally turns it on his enemies, he is wielding the very force that has made him obsolete. Traditional Western heroes relied on quick draws and steady aim to distinguish themselves from ordinary men. But the machine gun eliminates that advantage entirely and permanently. Anyone can pull the trigger and produce devastation. The codes of honor, the rituals of confrontation, the respect between worthy opponents all become irrelevant when technology removes the human element from combat. Peckinpah used this weapon as a symbol of progress, consuming everything in its path. The outlaws embrace it only in their final moments, becoming agents of the same mechanized destruction that has been erasing their way of life. Their victory is simultaneously their erasure from the world they knew. The myth of the gunfighter dies alongside them in that courtyard, replaced by something impersonal and coldly efficient. Number 18. Women were silent witnesses. Female characters appear throughout the film, but they rarely speak or take direct action. They observe from doorways and windows. They tend to wounded men without comment. They watch violence unfold with expressions that reveal more than dialogue ever could. This limited presence was not an oversight, but a deliberate choice by the filmmaker. Peckinpah positioned women as witnesses to masculine destruction rather than participants in it. They see the consequences that the men themselves cannot or will not acknowledge openly. Their silence speaks to powerlessness, to lives shaped by decisions they had no voice in making. When the violence ends, they remain to deal with what the men have left behind. This approach has drawn criticism over the decades for marginalizing female perspectives entirely. The women exist only in relation to male action, never as fully developed characters with their own stories. Yet within the film's specific framework, their silent observation serves a thematic purpose that cannot be ignored. They represent the world that continues after the shooting stops, the lives that must somehow rebuild from the wreckage and devastation. Number 19. The walk to death wasn't brave. The final march has become iconic. 4 men walk slowly through a village toward a confrontation they cannot possibly survive. Audiences have often interpreted this moment as heroic defiance, a last stand against impossible odds that cements their legendary status. But Peckinpah intended something far more complex and troubling than simple courage. Watch their faces during that walk. There is no determination or righteous fury visible in their expressions. What registers instead is exhaustion, acceptance, and something close to relief washing over them. These are men who have run out of alternatives and options. Death has been chasing them for years, and they have finally stopped running from it. The walk is not a charge, but a surrender to inevitability. This reframing changes the entire meaning of the finale. They are not dying for a cause or proving their valor to anyone. They are simply ending a life that has become unbearable to continue living. The violence that follows is not a blaze of glory, but a final spasm of men who no longer see any reason to preserve themselves. Peckinpah wanted audiences to recognize the difference between bravery and resignation. Number 20. Critics first called it dangerous. Opening night reviews were brutal and unforgiving. Critics condemned the film as morally corrupt and socially irresponsible. Some called for it to be banned entirely from theaters. The level of violence was blamed for potentially inspiring real-world harm among impressionable viewers. Peckinpah found himself defending his work against accusations that seemed to miss every point he had tried to make. The controversy dominated coverage for months after release. Newspapers debated whether such films should be permitted at all. Religious groups organized protests outside theaters showing it. Even some industry professionals distanced themselves from the production, worried about being associated with something so widely condemned as dangerous entertainment. Yet the reputation began shifting within just a few years of release. Critics who had initially attacked the film revisited it with fresh perspectives and different conclusions. They found depth and moral complexity where they had previously seen only exploitation. By the mid-1970s, the same publications that had called for bans were including it on lists of the decade's most important works. Time had proven Peckinpah right about his intentions. Number 21. Peckinpah rejected the action label. For the rest of his life, the director bristled when people called his most famous work an action film. He saw that label as a fundamental misunderstanding of everything he had tried to accomplish. In interviews, he repeatedly described it as a tragedy, a story about loss and obsolescence wrapped in the trappings of a Western genre picture. The distinction mattered deeply to him. Action films existed to thrill audiences with excitement and spectacle. They provided escape and satisfaction. But Peckinpah had crafted something designed to disturb rather than entertain. The violence was meant to horrify, not exhilarate. The ending was meant to devastate, not satisfy viewers seeking a triumphant conclusion. This misclassification frustrated Peckinpah because it shaped how audiences approached his work from the beginning. Those expecting action thrills often missed the deeper commentary entirely. They remembered the shootouts without understanding what those shootouts were meant to communicate about human nature. The tragedy label was not pretension, but a key to interpreting the film correctly, one that too many viewers never received or understood properly. The Wild Bunch was never designed to entertain in any conventional sense. Peckinpah created a film meant to disturb and challenge audiences, forcing them to confront violence rather than enjoy it. The chaos on set, the exhaustion of the cast, the controversial techniques all served a singular vision of men destroying themselves in a world that had already moved beyond them. More than 5 decades later, the film continues to unsettle viewers expecting a traditional Western. The violence remains difficult to watch. The ending offers no comfort. This discomfort was always the point, and it has lost none of its power. If this video revealed secrets you never knew, hit like and subscribe for more hidden film truths. Let us know in the comments, is The Wild Bunch a misunderstood masterpiece, or exactly the controversial film it was always meant to be?